All right, welcome to our next session entitled Silicon Valley Synergy. Now, I've heard over 100 pitches from startups and industry, and I would say most of them really struggle to partner with the health system, especially around AI solutions. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be moderating this panel where we talk about how do you build successful academic industry partnerships around AI. And to answer these questions, we have three titans in EM innovation. They're going to share their experiences, their insights to solve this problem, okay? First, we're going to start with Dr. Ryan Ribeira. He is an assistant professor, medical director, innovation fellowship director, and the Stanford EM Industry Partners Program Director, as well as CEO of SIMX, which is the largest VR medical simulation platform. We also have Dr. Graham Walker here with us, who is the creator and founder of MD Calc, used by 2 out of 3 doctors, including me. And he is also a social media influencer and leader, as well as the co-director of the advanced planning for TPMG, which is basically he's responsible for the implementation of new technologies and AI at Kaiser. So welcome back to the farm, Graham, and I love your app. Also, last but not least, we have Dr. Jim Williams, who is a professor, so educator, researcher, as well as an Army veteran. He's also the senior medical director for AstraZeneca and the chair of EM Foundation. And when Dr. Williams is not saving lives, he's also riding his bicycle up the Alps and up volcanoes. So we have a very accomplished group of doctors here, as with very interesting hobbies. And just to set the stage for this discussion, I want to ask a very basic question for all of you, right? Which is, what are the key factors of academic industry partnerships that allow it to succeed in building these AI solutions in a way that neither could alone?
Ryan, you want to start?
Sure, yeah, I guess I'll jump into that. I mean, I think just kind of laying out from a general framework perspective, I think, industry has the capital and the engineering workforce, and academia has the vision and the research chops generally to validate some of these tools. I'd say importantly, I think also academia has the mission to make the healthcare system overall fundamentally better. And so when we talk about, I guess, like why I personally am pretty passionate about academic industry collaborations, it's because it is that anchor that I think, if used correctly, can help make sure industry is guided towards solutions that overall are on the net better for patients and for practitioners versus purely profit driven.
James, go for it.
Okay, so I agree. I love what you said, Ryan, about the mission. I think that's a key part where first you look at the mission statements of the organizations, and that's a key driver of it. I think they complement each other. AZ, as an example, we bring innovation. We have an incredible worldwide reach, and with that comes some funding. And it really complements Stanford's ability to have the patient and the clinically centric model. But what Stanford brings uniquely also is their uniquely entrepreneurial spirit to this. And I think you said it right off the bat, Ryan, you recognize the benefit of the scalability and really accelerating the transformative change we're both after, but it's really mission driven.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that's been said. I think it's really the ability to scale that's particularly key. Academics is great at starting out pilots, and then it's kind of the scale and the productize piece of it. The ability to take something that's a pilot and say, okay, how are we going to deploy this to 10,000 doctors, or how are we going to turn this into a product to sell? I think that's where that handoff, I think, takes place.
I love that. Yeah, and definitely just maximizing the impact of the work that we're doing. And so my next question is actually to Ryan and Graham. So I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of startup pitches, right? And then my question to you is, what type of companies and founders, what phenotype, what are the characteristics that make for the best type of partners for your health system? What's the secret sauce?
I can start on this one, Ryan. I'll just say it's somebody that has worked in healthcare. That immediately cuts through 3 layers of skepticism. In particular, if it's somebody that is continuing to practice, eating their own dog food. I think that term's overused, but if somebody is a practicing doctor, nurse, pharmacist, social worker, whatever it is, that is going to add numerous layers of trust and respect that cannot be replicated in any other way. I don't care how many amazing companies you've worked for, what your incredible pedigree is from Stanford and Harvard and all the big names. You get way further by just having put in the time of seeing patients and understanding exactly what are the challenges of delivering healthcare.
I was actually going to say basically the same thing as my number one, which is, a proximity to the clinical world, whether that is your own background in healthcare or, your biomedical researcher or something. But and this is like much rarer than one might expect, because I feel like in other areas, it is standard basically for founders to have some type of domain expertise in what they're building. But I think within healthcare, perhaps because the market sizes can look really big on paper, and I think there's a lot of people without a healthcare background who want to do something that's positive and impactful in the world. They think, well, I'll take my computer engineering chops and apply it to the healthcare space. And and I can see how it can seem a little unfair if someone might say, well, so are you saying you have to be a doctor or a nurse to start a healthcare company? Not exactly, but I mean, I think if you were to ask that same question and say, well, do I have to be a runner to start a company that serves runners? Yeah, kind of, actually. I mean, you at least need to like really understand them very well. Otherwise, how can you possibly be successful? So I would agree with that. I would also agree, I think when we're talking about, academic industry collaborations in particular, I would say, again, you don't have to be a researcher, but you have to appreciate and understand the value of a research perspective. At least in the way that I often see these collaborations working well, it is around things like collaborative research and validation. And I think sometimes there's friction when you get a startup founder who, wants to move fast and break things, which is overall fine, but they're like, well, why do we need to have this many people in the study? Can't we just do it with 5 people? And that if it works for them, it'll probably work for everyone else. It's not really the way that, research works, and that's not really the way that statistics works. And so I think there can be some friction there too if they don't really understand that aspect of it.
Ryan, I'll just add, I jotted down a couple notes. I think you're totally right. There are fewer people doing this that are clinicians or in working in healthcare. I tell people, in fact, that might be a good thing, right? There's less competition. I mean, there are fewer people doing this because medicine and healthcare typically provides a pretty good salary for people for a long period of their working lives. There are fewer people that are willing to risk trying this or willing to spend their free time on this. So I think that can be a good thing, that there's fewer people trying and less competition out there. The other adjectives I wrote down in terms of founder phenotypes are partner, curiosity, humility, understanding that, especially if you're not in healthcare, understanding that the problem that you're solving may not be the exact same one that the partner once solved. Understanding that like having a shared vision is critically important for both sides to agree, like, hey, this is a partnership. We want to work together on this. It's not one telling the other necessarily how things should work.
I 100% agree with you guys. And as someone like you guys who have seen a lot of startups, I feel like there's a much deeper understanding if the founder, the co-founder, or someone on the C-suite is a physician, right? And they understand our pain points and operational challenges better than people who aren't in our field. And so I love that. Next question we have for Jim, all right, is similar in the sense of what does AZ do as this top 10, multinational corporation, very big? How does it effectively partner with academic medical centers to build these cutting edge AI solutions, right? What's the secret sauce for AZ, and how do you stay in the cutting edge?
You're right. AZ is a phenomenal place. And just by way of background, and I'll share, Ryan, what you and Graham had said. I'm still a practicing emergency physician. I think that's key to build trust and credibility. I have my daytime job, but I'm still working in the shift. And that sense of shared vision and understanding the challenges that we're going after is huge. So what does that bring to AZ? Well, it brings the street information, what's really happening day to day. How does ADC collaborate with academics? I think it gets back to really the shared mission. We are a huge multinational organization. We're the 6th largest pharmaceutical company in the world. It's incredible, but we don't have access to patients. We don't have the clinical expertise that certainly Stanford has. And so the combination of those two, really, it makes it great. So even if you just look on the web, reading the mission statements, that our focus is on disease management, and we want to, I'll just read it real quickly. We want to push the boundaries of science to deliver life-changing medicines that transforms lives at healthcare systems and societies. So it really hits on everything from the patient, but also the scalability of it. And so look how this integrates so well with Stanford's mission statement. They want to improve human health, both by discovery, by teaching, and by patient care. So those two really integrate well. And I think the forces that we bring together, it helps to scale that on a dramatic stage. If you couple AI with that, now you really accelerate that standard of care and that acceleration of changing systems of care. So the integration is really phenomenal, and we're really fortunate to have the partnership.
That's fantastic. And another testament to why physician leaders are so important to be in the forefront of innovation. So I love that. Now to the fun part. I would love to hear from all of you any case studies of AI solutions that you're either leading or have led that have been a success. And so what were the drivers of success for that?
I'll be happy to take that. I feel like
Yeah,
Danny,
go
you
for
and
it.
I might have a
Please.
shared story in common, and Ryan, you might be a part of this too. So the stories, I think, really bring excitement to everybody, just like when you're talking to physicians. Let me tell you about a case I saw just last night, right? We all love a case. So same thing for the AI case. We have a unique challenge with AZ. We have a group that's called the cardiovascular renal metabolic space. And in that space is the acute care space. And it's the first of its kind with AZ. Every other product with AstraZeneca is outpatient. So even though we have 21 products in our pipeline, it's all outpatient. So uniquely, this space is inpatient. And we recognize that Stanford would be an incredible partner with this for a variety of reasons that I've already mentioned. And so we're looking specifically at the unique challenges of complex patients. One in particular are anticoagulated associated life-threatening hemorrhages. Well, these are the sick patients. I think we all recognize that, right? So how do we collaborate with that? And if you look at both the complexity of the case and the time-sensitive nature of any intervention that we have, whether it's diagnostic, but in our case, therapeutic, that's where we're really looking to AI to accelerate both the diagnosis and then the treatment of care, right? It's all about it. So Graham, like probably everybody else who's on there, I use MD Calc. It's great, but we're really trying to move, believe it or not, one step beyond that to say, okay, what are really some unique ways that I can risk stratify and identify these patients that may not be intuitive in a heuristic sense?
Right.
And that's where we're looking at really some deep learning language models, but it's not just from text. And I think ideally, if you go to non-text models of using AI, I mean, just think how rapid you can transfer the systems of care. So it's easy to do a retrospective data, but low level of evidence. RCTs, it's huge, highest level of evidence, but an incredible cost burden. So how do we leverage AI to really find maybe the sweet spot between those 2 points to really give us robust data that's now going to be actionable? And so that's where Andy and I and Dev and several other people on both our teams have really collaborated to say, in this really complex space, how do we then use all these tools to bring it back to the patient and optimize our outcomes to really enhance care? And I think that's one of the exciting things. So if you were to, just imagine the patient care journey. We're in the emergency department, code stroke is called beforehand. We're gathering there. We're able to integrate all this information as the patient comes in, both from the EMR before the patient even arrives. Now, as we get our diagnostic tools, is AI in some way maybe going to someday be able to interpret that and then integrate it? And instead of this clinical care pathway that's in still a clunky version of an EMR, no matter how robust they are, we still have a lot of benefit there to really within seconds start the treatment of care. And like so many other diseases that are time sensitive, if we can do that, I think the optimization of care is going to be dramatic. So that's just one thing I think we're all really excited about, and the potential is huge because frankly, the unmet need is dramatic, and it's only getting bigger. So we're really excited about that.
100%. I love that example.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
can
Ryan.
take you through a few examples, just for those who are in industry or looking to kind of collaborate with industry from the academic side, just in kind of different ways that we have collaborated here at Stanford. So like one good example is a company called BrainScope, where they make a tool that is like a quick EEG for ruling out brain bleeds, and it is an AI tool because I mean the EEG is the EEG. The innovation here is an algorithm that can look at those squiggles and output actually interpretable information by an EM doc at the bedside. And I think the industry partners here recognize accurately that if you're going to use this in place of a CT scan, you need some hefty clinical validation. And so, I think got together academic partners, they collaborated on the protocols for this, like multi-site trial, and then we participated as part of that, like really putting it head to head against CT scans, and we're still working on the results of that. I think that's one very good form of academic industry collaboration. Another one that we've done here at Stanford is more around like product development. So we have another one, which I don't know if I can name because it's still an ongoing relationship, where they make an AI tool for kind of taking EMR data and giving it to you in a dashboard before you go see your patients and making that smart based on the patient's chief complaint, et cetera. And the form of that collaboration is in us having some of our docs that are using it on a regular basis, participating in feedback sessions. They're doing loops of iteration on their product, and we're helping them shape that into something that is actually useful in workflows. I think another good way that industry can collaborate, because sometimes those nuances of how it will really work in the real world are very hard to predict, and you really need a partner you can work with closely to do those loops of iteration. And then finally, I'll say, one other form of collaboration I've experienced from the other side in our company at Symex, we make virtual reality training tools. We were tasked with a contract to build a women's health curriculum for the military. We have docs on our team. Obviously, I'm a doc. We got a bunch of others. This is a very nuanced area where we really needed expertise. And so we went to USF, University of South Florida, that trains a lot of military medics. And they have a bunch of academicians there who do this training on a regular basis. When we're thinking what curriculum is actually going to meet the needs the best, I mean, they're able to co-develop this with us in a way that we can ensure is going to meet the needs of actual learners. So just kind of, three examples of three different forms and ways that I think industry and academia can leverage each other's strengths.
Andy, I can give you a couple examples. A pilot, a large-scale AI tool, and then I will also plug a completely non-AI innovation as well. We are working with Salesforce on some agentic AI tools as a reference engine. Have done a small pilot with about 120 physicians. Went extremely well. And then with AI scribes, we put out an article in the New England Journal Catalyst series with NABLA. Deployed that to our 10,000 physicians. Over the past 2 months, we've switched to a bridge for lots of complex regions. NABLA is a great tool as well, and are deploying that enterprise-wide to, everybody. So all physicians in all of KP, not just Northern California, plus nurse practitioners, psychologists, social workers, everybody available as well. And that's also going really well. With some Epic integrations from our bridge. And then finally, I'll just plug literally nothing to do with AI, not sexy, not exciting at all, just some basic changes to how patients interact with MyChart within our system. And we've built out a virtual medical center. Essentially, we have virtualists who don't have a panel of patients they care for. They only manage virtual care work. And these physicians have saved hundreds of thousands of physician hours of time with efficiencies. So that obviously leads to, big dollar signs, but more importantly, it leads to less burnout, fewer messages, going to primary care physician specialists that are, often of a nature that are related to like operations, like what time is the pharmacy open? Can you refill my prescription? Stuff that doesn't really need a physician necessarily. And so, yeah, that's been a particularly helpful thing and has nothing to do with AI, but it is worth probably millions upon millions of dollars for us internally as well.
That's remarkable, and just an example that some of the biggest problems are really the lowest hanging fruits that we need to solve. So I also want to make a plug for your NESM Catalyst piece with AI scribes. I loved it. The results were very impressive. So congratulations with that.
I think
Now,
we're gonna have a follow up with at a year and transitioning to a bridge. I think the authors are working on right now too.
Yeah, please send it my way and our way, actually. Now, the way we talk about AI solutions, it sounds so easy, but we know that's far from the truth. There are plenty of challenges. And so I would love for you guys to share, from the perspective of academia and industry, what are some big challenges that you face when partnering with each other, and how do you navigate them? And are there any cautionary tales that you want to share with us? Any juicy stories?
Are you setting yourself up for any juicy stories,
I
Andy?
hope not.
So we'll leave that offline. I don't have any other than he has a gorgeous newborn baby. So I think the challenge is they're obviously there, but frankly, I'll speak from the experience that we've had with Stanford. It really gets to what the mission statements are and how they align. And
Right.
From that, you have to have trust in relationships. It's very similar to, I think, the patient physician relationship. Any collaboration, any partnership, there's got to be a sense of trust and integrity in that process. Foundationally, that's critical. And I think without that, you're setting yourself up for failure. Fortunately, we've had nothing but success with that, with our relationship thus far. Like anything else, so if you have that foundation, then it's a matter of defining, what your unmet need is or what your goal is. Is it relevant? Is it clinically relevant? Or is it really just, some niche that there's really not a lot of buy-in in? So I think once you agree to define that unmet need, then it's a matter of how you're attacking it. And as far as some of the safeguards that you want to build into it, that also is collaborative, because again, you're starting with that common shared vision. And so if it's patient-centric, I think you're going to keep yourself really in good stead, because the safeguards will be there. You'll have some operational challenges, I think, but in the big scheme of things, those are easily overcome. All of us, I'm sure, Graham, Ryan, we've all had some challenges in moving forward. We don't meet deadlines, perhaps, or, there are hiccups. But again, foundationally, if you have that integration of trust, mission statement, and relationship building, also centered on the patient-centered focus, I think you'll do really well. And honestly, in the big picture, then all the challenges, you recognize what they are. They're minimal and they can be overcome, and those barriers are easily surpassed.
I love that. It's like shared values and institutional priorities, can overcome so many challenges. So that's important for our audience members to hear.
Andy, I'll say I have a spicy story that I'll keep anonymous. I was sitting next to an IT leader at a Bay Area health system, I will say, and they chose to deploy their own internal version of ChatGPT. I mean, essentially it's ChatGPT, but it's running on an Azure server, and they have a BAA with I think Microsoft, maybe OpenAI, because they were seeing PHI leak. I think it's, but I understand why, right? Even physicians in the Bay Area don't truly understand the what happens when you send information to ChatGPT, and they don't really care. They want help with their problem. They have a problem that they want to use ChatGPT to solve. And so I totally understand why this organization decided to deploy, as close to the same UI as ChatGPT, just for PHI leakage reasons. And then I'll say the other thing that I think is going to be one of the larger challenges in AI. I think there's a lot of emphasis on bias, and we talk a lot about bias. I think the harder thing is going to be the black box piece, especially around predictive, tools using machine learning. It's probably easy if we say you have an inpatient or ER patient, you say, hey, this person has a high risk of mortality based on this score in the next 48 hours. That's probably helpful. You could imagine someone's going to come up with a score that says, hey, this patient has a high risk of mortality in the next 90 days or 6 months or 2 years.
Right.
What the hell do you do with that? I mean, unless there's some identifiable obvious risk factors that you can easily modify, who knows how we're going to handle, hey, this thing is saying there's something bad that's going to happen in the next 2 years. But if you can't tell what it is, how are we going to handle that? Are we going to do more testing to try to figure it out? Are we going to shrug and say, think about what your options are? I think the black box piece is going to be a big challenge, and I think we'll only make progress if we have some tools along the way that actually have explainability built into them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was gonna say I agree with that 100%. I mean, you can imagine the algorithm tells you to call a code, because on a 28-year-old, you're like, why?
Give this person chemo. We don't know why, but you should.
Yeah, that's gonna be rough. But at the same time, obviously, if it doesn't tell us things that we wouldn't have predicted, then it's not providing added value. So that's the tension. I agree with everything that's been said. I would say, when it comes to the collaboration specifically, one of the areas of frictions I have seen is that timelines are generally different, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're working with early stage companies, and they, approach academia for a collaboration. We're like, yeah, sounds good. We'll start the paperwork now, and we'll be able to start the collaboration in 9 months. And they're like, we don't know if we'll be around in 9 months. And
Right.
I think that can be a real challenge, especially with those early stage companies. I think another big trick I've seen is around, data access and being able to utilize it in algorithm development. I think academia is rightly protective of our patient data. And so very often in collaborations does not really want that data to be utilized in algorithms that will then be commercialized without a lot of restrictions and things like this. I do think one of the challenges, though, ends up being that community medicine doesn't always have those same qualms.
Right.
Some circumstances, we're then just kind of removing ourselves from the process of developing these new tools, and I'm not sure exactly what the right answer is, but I think that is a big challenge. And then I was going to say, I think on the academic side, I think one of the barriers I've seen is that sometimes academia falsely believes that we can do it better, right? I mean, certainly we've got the best AI scientists. Like, why can't we develop our own algorithms and tools? And it's not to say that can't ever be a productive way to develop new products. There are spin-outs from academic research that can go on to be very valuable. But I think, we in academia sometimes underappreciate that the challenges of AI are very rarely the nuances of algorithm quality. And it is much more about how does this fit into a workflow, and how do you make an interface around this that is usable by a normal person, and how do you build a business model around this that is going to be sustainable. And so sometimes there's some friction there where academia, I think, might overvalue the fact that, well, we have the cutting edge algorithms, and industry is just like, look, we just need you to tell us how we can convince doctors to use this.
And it's interesting because I feel like different health systems have adopted different philosophies around internal and external innovations and partnerships, right? Looking at California, the Stanfords, and Boston, New York. So it's really a fascinating time, I think, and seeing what's going to come out of that. I also want to be mindful of our audience questions. So we have a Dr. Ajit. He's basically working on AI-driven healthcare solutions. And for your project, what are the biggest challenges you faced in integrating AI into clinical workflows? And how did you address them to ensure clinical adoption? This is for anyone.
That's a great question. I'll lead off with that. We're still working through our AI models and some of the predictive modeling of it. So we haven't yet had the chance to see, how it works and what some of the side effects are. We're addressing that up front, at least to say, really define what our unmet need is. So we talked about the black box earlier. I think that's really critical. You got to define what the parameters are of your project first to avoid some of these things. So you don't have information that's hanging out there. It's not actionable, right? And then what do you do with that? So we want to limit ourselves to the extent that it's actionable, but also still being open enough because we don't know what we don't know, right? So that's a big component of it. Also, obviously, you got to beta test site it, and you have to run several iterations of it. Your first time clearly will not be the first. And with any key, and I see this from a lot of ways, whether we're being pitched new ideas in whatever role I'm wearing, is how do you really implement it? So there might be great ideas, and academics might have one component, one focus, and industry might have something else. But at the end of the day, really, if you're patient-centered, how do you implement it to make that happen, right? Is it through the EMR? Is AMI, is it helping you, or is it just bogging you down and not really helping accelerate getting where you want to be to your end goal? I think those are some key basic principles of establishing that. But having said that, you have to have the flexibility as a project works through, right? You make adjustments as new data, new information, new scenarios come up.
Absolutely. And, just to piggyback off that, I think another audience member, D-Raj, wrote, any insights into the liability component? And, we can also just conjecture of usage of these AI techs, especially with the black box predictions. Maybe a more pertinent question is, will clinician liability increase because we didn't act on a piece of information or predictive analytics? Will the companies that deploy or develop the technology have any share of the liability? It's a fascinating point to talk about.
I feel pretty strongly about this one. I think if technology companies want a piece of that juicy healthcare pie, they need, like, join the club. Come and join us in the ER and accept the same liability standards that Ryan, James, and I have. That comes with the territory. We don't have a choice of that. And so, I feel really strongly, it comes back to our original point about having a healthcare leader on your team or being a founder. I feel it's really different if you have been a person who has missed a diagnosis, who has made a mistake that has impacted a human's life. I
Right.
think there's just a level of gravitas that comes with that, with the responsibility that we have caring for human beings, that I don't think a lot of technology companies and salespeople necessarily have. I think the liability piece is going to be a really interesting one. There was a statement from the Federation of State Medical Boards who said, "Oh, it's always on the doctors," and that's their policy. Now, I don't know if each individual state will follow through with that same policy, but that will also hamper progress or adoption of AI tools. If I tell James, "Hey, James, you have to use this new AI tool, but it's all on you. If it screws up, if you trust it and you were wrong, or you don't trust it and you were wrong, it's still your fault. You still have liability for that." James is going to be like, "I'm not going to use that tool. Why would I trust that?" So.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting problem, and I don't disagree with any of that, in the sense that, like, I think there is probably a positive future where there's some shared liability. I think there is kind of a way of looking at this, though, where one looks at AI decision support in the same way that one would look at, like, a diagnostic tool like a CT scan. Right? I mean, we know, like, if you do just a plain non-con and a subarachnoid hemorrhage more than 6 hours out or something, it just doesn't pick it up, and that limitation exists and is known in the academic community. And I don't think we would say, you make a non-con CT that missed head bleeds, therefore you are responsible for the fact that that wasn't picked up. It does ultimately fall to the doc to know the limitations of the tools that they're applying. And I think one of the challenges here, though, is that, we can describe detailed test statistics for diagnostic tools, and even for decision, the heart score, right? Like, you can figure out what the test statistics are, and you as the one applying the heart score can, determine if you're comfortable with the level of risk associated with following its guidelines. That's a little harder to do with a lot of AI tools in certain contexts, especially. So I don't know. My feeling is that probably the answer, though, is to try to treat most AI tools like diagnostic aids, like decision support, or diagnostic tools, and to the best of our ability, define test statistics within certain parameters, and make sure that information is very clear and is studied, in robust ways, so that the providers can know the limitations of what they're applying.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on that too. Everything that you said is valid. very simply, I look at AI as a tool. And like any other tool, number one, it's got to be how you manufacture that tool, but also it's how you implement that tool. And so that's the shared risk I think that we all take. It would be unreasonable for somebody to say, because you manufacture it, if I apply it in the wrong way, that's on me. If I look at residents who are trying to use some of the apps of risk prediction and they're applying it to the wrong population, this is purely a hypothetical, of course. That's something where you have the tool is excellent, but they're simply applying it to the wrong way. And so the onus is on industry to create that tool that's robust, it's been tested and validated. But then also the user, obviously, like we've all said, they have to be able to use it and apply it to the right scenario, to the right patient population, and then understand how to act on what the outcome is, whether it's expected or unexpected, whether it's real or perceived.
And you guys all mentioned some fascinating points. It makes me wonder, we have all these technological advancements and, Graham, you mentioned there's some liability shared by the physician potentially, right? But how prepared are we as current and future doctors to even understand AI and the explainability piece? Right? I think that's a very interesting question is, are we preparing our future doctors and even ourselves for what's inevitably going to come? And if not, what can we do? Right? I feel like that's very important for academic industry partnerships, because if we don't even know what we're looking for as doctors, how do we even know what the good partners are?
Yeah, Andrew, I completely agree. And I think one of my biggest fears actually is around medical education and training.
100%.
As AI gets better and better and we start to trust it more, I do strongly worry that we will lose we're for emergency physicians. Our younger counterparts may lose some of that ability to know sick versus not sick, know
Right.
when, to Ryan's point, know when to trust the AI tool, or when to understand that like a CT head more than 6 hours out may miss a couple subarachnoid hemorrhages. So in some ways, I think we have to double down even harder on medical education and hammer in Gestalt and hammer in the physical exam. All these things, because we're gonna have to fight against, I think, a lot of stuff that's gonna make things easier for doctors, but there are consequences for trainees.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And even if you look at some of the tools that we've had over the past 10, 20 years, as simple as doing direct laryngoscopy to glide scope, right? Huge innovation. But what if something fails? Do you have the backup?
Right.
Do you know how to apply it, whether it's ultrasound? And certainly these predictive modelings, the thing that it's seen often, at least, love so many of the tools that are out there. But if you don't apply it to the right population, then it's fool's gold, because you're saying, oh, it's okay, it's fine to send them home. Well, you're not applying it to the right patient population. You're setting both yourself up and the patient up for failure. Yeah, I agree completely with that.
Yeah, I agree with those things too. I will add, though, maybe a positive spin on the same concept, just for conceptual variety here in this discussion, which is, though, that I think if we use some of those examples, like, video versus direct laryngoscopy, do you need to like be able to maintain your ability to do backup? Yes. Is the world better when we're using video laryngoscopy most of the time? Yes. And I'd say same deal for things like the heart score. And I think there are some docs who might lament like the world where we're using our clinical gestalt to determine who needs to stay and who doesn't is lost. And maybe, but if you take 1,000 docs and 1 million patients and you apply the heart score every time, and you're going to get better outcomes than everybody just trying to use their gestalt guided by however much research they have or haven't read. And so I think there is a world where, correctly applied, these AI tools take us in a similar direction, where as long as we understand their strengths and limitations, and as long as we teach people proper application, they will overall result in better outcomes. But I think it's true, you always got to, maintain that context and understand your backups.
There are a lot of counterfactuals, Ryan. I think who's not trusting the automated CBC diff thing?
Great point.
I'm not going down to the lab and saying, are you sure it's 12.7 and there's no bands? I'm like, I just trust the system. Same with the chemistry panel. I mean, same with all the labs. I'm not debating that. I'm just trusting that it's right. Now, obviously that's labs are highly regulated and lots of standards, and the machines have,
Right.
a whole process to calibrate them. But there are absolutely parts of medicine. It's kind of like using a calculator as well, right? Where we just trust the thing to do the thing better than a human can do.
Well, it's
Right.
interesting though. So let me raise a quick point, if I may. And I agree, Ryan, completely with what you said. But even something as simple as a lab test, I'm not checking the CBC, but there is something fundamental. Do you even know if it truly is a high sensitivity troponin that you're using as an example? And that's a
Sure.
huge
Yeah.
thing, and this is, my gosh, they've been around now for more than 10 years, it seems, right? So there are fundamental things, and that's one where, Andy, getting back to your initial question, how do we as educators
Right.
really help people who are now coming into the field? No, I'm not expecting everybody to go down and spin down their specimen and learn how to aliquot it for the assay. Not at all. But you do have to know some of what you're dealing with. And this is also an important thing, what Ryan and Graham, you mentioned early on about being a physician and having the street cred, because uniquely, whether we're a physician or whether we're entrepreneurial or whether we're industry, we've been able to say that we've done all these things, right? And so when we ask, let's say, a nurse or somebody else on our healthcare team to help us out with something, by and large, we've been able to say we've done that, and it gives us a really unique perspective. So how do we train some of the folks coming up with the residents? I think that's a very important part to say, yes, when you're learning right up front, maybe it is reasonable to sort of do it the hard way and then advance to some of these more things that'll help give you scalability and efficiencies of care, because absolutely they're needed, but you need to have a sense of perspective in how you're applying that tool.
Absolutely. And Graham, I would love to go down to the lab and count the individual red blood cells with you. I think we should be the control there. So
Yeah. I'm signing myself up right now.
yeah, we'll spend 5 hours up for our shift. I have some questions, but there's some great audience questions I just want to touch on. What are some partnerships that didn't go so well? And no need to name names, but what were the sort of general themes and circumstances?
I've experienced a number on both ends that were just killed by time, like where we had a partner approach us at Stanford, and they're ready to go. They've got a great idea. It's a great fit. They've got the funds, and we just can't push it through in time. And similarly, as the innovator trying to work with certain institutions, sometimes we say, hey, good news, we got a grant. We want to make you part of it. We want to get you some money. We just need this paperwork done in the next 45 days. And they're like, impossible, unfortunately.
I would say know your audience. The thing that comes up often for us within Kaiser Permanente and the Permanente Medical Group is a lot of the pitches are around fee for service, and hey, this AI tool can increase your revenue by routing more people to cardiology, and that's literally the opposite of what we want. We want to get the right people to cardiologists, and if you don't need a cardiologist, don't go to a cardiologist. And then the other piece would just be around like size of the company. I joined earlier with our VC friends on, and if a pilot is one thing, but if you're proposing a partnership between Stanford or Kaiser, I mean any larger health system, you cannot support that with a staff of 10 people. You're just not large enough. And so maybe you need venture funding, maybe you need a couple years to grow your company, but you just cannot support and have a successful launch supporting 10,000 doctors and 4 million patients with a company of 10 people.
Yeah, agreed. And fortunately, I've not had any nightmare stories, but I've heard some in a variety of different roles. And the summary would be that the idea could be great, the interest and motivation could be phenomenal, but unless either partner has both the capital and the means to really make any of that happen, it's going to be a failed initiative. Unfortunately, you have to know what's required for the project, setting a timeline, setting shared expectations when that's going to occur, setting what your end product is going to be, and what kind of financing is going to be required to make that happen. think those are important things, and that's otherwise it's going to be a rocky road for you.
And just to piggyback off that, there's another question that asks, how can large health systems get faster to better fit startup timelines, or can they? How can we innovate internally?
I mean, that having your ducks in a row is going to be important, and just some of
Right.
the misses are not having all your. I mean, security is going to be 1, 2, and 3. No health system is going to talk to you until you have a whole security process completed, probably SOC 2 compliance. I mean, probably, get all your security merit badges in a row and all your server and data diagrams ready, because nobody's going to even have a conversation with you if you cannot execute a BAA and prove that you are going to take their patient's data and their data in utmost serious privacy. So that's certainly the first piece. And then again, I think just going back to understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, making sure that lines up with a problem that needs solving, and being open to, pivoting or slightly changing things if the health system says, "Hey, we would love it if your tool could do X." Not saying you have to implement X right away, but make sure that you have the bandwidth to add X to your, product roadmap, and, bump it up.
I would say, in thinking from the kind of academic side about how you can kind of get good at this stuff, I think some of it, I mean, like getting good at anything, it's just reps, right? But I think understanding that you probably can't boil the ocean and just be the ideal partner for every type of context, and figuring out like what, based on your strengths, your institution would be able to provide that would be appealing to industry, and then just like carving out that space and doing it really well. Right. So I know for us at Stanford, and we did kind of try to bow the ocean at first, but we've found that, okay, you know what, these collaborative industry funded research where we're helping them validate either, a tool that works in another environment and needs to be validated in an ED context, or a tool that's already been validated in the ED context and they want to like measure its throughput and cost and efficiency. These are the contexts that we're going to get good at. And then you just do a few reps on that and get your workflows down until those are working really well. And I've seen that from the industry side too. I know, like, we know, hey, if we want to do like a SBIR, like a small business innovation research collaboration, there's a couple institutions that are just so good at that. And they know exactly what you're talking about. They know all the steps. But they're not the same institutions we'd go to if we want to collaborate on building like a curriculum, because there's other institutions that they've got people that are, all they do is do collaborative curricula with education industry companies, and they're really good at that. So I'd say that's, you're not going to be super fast at everything, but find what your relative strengths are, and just do some reps on that until you get the workflow smoothed out.
I love that.
Yeah.
So many questions. Oh, were you guys going to say something?
I agree with that. And I think the main point is to stay focused on what your goal is, what your output is going to be, and avoid the scope creep. Because if you try to be all things to all people, and it's really easy to happen with AI as things just blow up the project, you really have to pull yourself back and stay focused.
Time flies when you're having fun. We're at almost 11:50, so I want to make sure we have another question we can ask from the audience members. Many startups need revenue to survive. How do we make sure that we don't have pilots that go nowhere? That's a good question.
I would say scoping it well, understanding what's, getting agreement on what's success, how long are we going to do this, how are we going to measure it, and making sure that's in alignment. And then what are the outcomes going to be from the pilot? If the pilot goes well, is there some contractual agreement to expand the pilot?
Right.
Especially if the company is supporting the pilot with their own dollars, and the health system is, just supporting it with their time. What are the next steps of the pilot? Understanding that as well. I think that is one of the challenges of working with health systems. The sales cycle is slow and long, and you have to jump through 30 committees, and any one committee can throw a wrench in things. I wouldn't be surprised if that the level of challenge working with health systems drives a lot of people toward kind of direct to consumer stuff, or areas outside of traditional kind of health system approaches as well.
Right.
Yeah, I was kind of laughing while you were reading that question, and not that it's a silly question, but I've been there myself many times.
Yeah.
And and it is frustrating, and I think unfortunately it is, as Graham was saying, somewhat the reality of selling products into healthcare environments, especially, this is less true if what you're doing is not like part of the chain of life-saving workflows. I like with my current project where we're doing educational stuff, then sometimes you can expedite things a bit. But I think it is true. I mean, if you're doing something that people are going to use in their job to make life or death decisions, I think you have to have the expectation that it is going to be a long sales cycle and it's going to be arduous, and they are not all going to pan out. Many of your pilots will go nowhere because they will determine that it's not a good fit. And I think that just speaks to it. If you are trying to innovate in that kind of space, these are the type of products that generally need, frankly, just more runway. You need to raise more upfront so that you can account for the fact that it's going to take you a lot longer to get to operational break even. And that is just the nature of working in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed with that. And the other thing that I've seen being involved with a small startup, they had a great idea, great model, but there's also got to be a sense, particularly in the construct of fundraising. The investors are going to clearly ask, what's the ROI? And to that extent, what is the scalability of your project? How are you, and what's the market that you're going to be able to reach? You want to have a focus, but there's also got to be an appropriate market ability to scale your product, whether it's diagnostic or therapeutic, to help run. And then lastly, the timeline during which any of your metrics are going to be met, so that you're holding each other accountable for it. And in that sense of shared expectation, again, I think the project is much better suited for success.
Yeah, and I think all of you have touched on this idea that it's very important to understand your institution's priorities, right? I mean, we all know that ED capacity boarding is a crisis across the nation, and some startups want to solve, small $1 million problems, which are important, but our executives are focused on the $1 billion problems, and where are our patients going to go after they're admitted? So I think that's another thing to consider for startups, like what are the problems being solved, and the health system, like what do they care about? So I want to squeeze in maybe 2 more questions. I'm going to be ambitious here. One I love to ask is, do you have a controversial or contrarian viewpoint on AI in emergency medicine? And we would love to hear your spicy take.
I'll take this, and I'm not wearing my AZ hat now.
Okay, I like this. I like where this is going.
No, it's with the American College of Emergency Physicians, and we have
Oh, wow.
we have an AI task force. And it's really interesting because all of us have real interest in this and where it's going. And so it's not anything spicy, but we recognize what some of the potential problems are downstream. So we're really taking baby steps to say, how can we help our 40,000 plus members access AI, use AI appropriately, and really avoid some of these pitfalls. So the first project that we had out at Scientific Assembly in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago was simply to send out a membership questionnaire. And if you haven't done it, please feel free to do so. I'd show a QR code if I could right now. But that's just one example of really how do we use it and help the rest of our brethren to use it appropriately and help our patients.
Love that.
I've got one for sure, which is, I think it is a common sentiment in healthcare that, hey, the proper use of AI is not to replace people, not to replace doctors or nurses, but just to help them in their jobs. And frankly, I don't know that I agree with that over the long term. And the reason why is, we need large scale change in affordability and efficiency in healthcare delivery. It's just a huge part of GDP. It's millions and millions of dollars. Costs just go up as we advance in how we practice medicine. And when you look at other industries like that, the only thing that gets you out of that is technology innovation. You can't get policy changes that will get you like a 90% reduction in costs or a 20x increase in efficiency. That has to happen from technology innovation. And I think our best hope for that in healthcare is AI. And for it to do that, for it to have that scale of effect on affordability and efficiency, in some places, in some cases, it will need to do things that were previously done by people. And I'm not saying that I'm advocating for a world where doctors are all out of a job and you're just letting the AI prescribe you medicines. Not at all. But I think there are things on the edges of what we do that I think as it improves, we should be okay with having AI take on those responsibilities. And that is over the long term, probably going to be better for our patients and our healthcare system. So anyway, that's my spicy take.
I love that, Ryan. I agree. I think we are going to need double-digit increases in efficiency and ability to manage patients. I don't know what's going on down at Stanford, but certainly up here in San Francisco, my patients are older and way more complex, and they're like all on blood thinners. They're
Yeah.
way harder to manage. It used to be that it was like, oh my God, a 90-year-old in the ER? Now it's like, oh, every day. Oh yeah, my sign out is like, oh, a 95-year-old with blah. It's like so common. I guess I would say my spicy take about emergency medicine, specifically in AI, is that the benefits we're going to gain are actually upstream of the emergency department, and it's keeping people who don't need to be in the ER out of the ER by giving them AI tools that help them manage their own problems. We are able to create new access in outpatient land to get somebody that needs to see a specialist to see that specialist, not to come to the ER to get a referral to see the specialist. So I think that'll actually be way more impactful than any AI tool once the patient is within our realm.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And especially because, I'm sure we all agree the number of patients we're seeing year over year is going up, right? And there's some emergency departments in the rural areas that are closing down, and our catchment area gets bigger, for a number of reasons. And so I think it's very important to think upstream as well, and how do we empower our patients to stay out of the emergency department. So that's a great point. All of you, great points. I wish we could have another hour. I mean, I can talk with you for many hours, but I just want to say, Ryan, Graham, Jim, thank you guys so much for sharing your wisdom with me, for all the audience members here. I mean, clearly academic industry partnerships are so important for accelerating the development and implementation of AI, right, in clinical settings and improving patient outcomes. So really, just thank you so much.